Okay, let me repeat a little bit what we have said yesterday. First of all, we said that there is no an explicit verse in the Bible which would teach about the creation out of nothing. So what we have just maybe indirect references to it. And some of the ideas about the creation out of nothing uh, for the first time appeared in the deuterocanonical books or pseudoepigrapha or some other literature. For example, in Second Maccabees, we have a statement about the creation out of nothing, but in fact, it is not very convincing argument because a similar phrase we can find in another work of Greek author Xenophon, and in this case, this phrase doesn't refer to the creation out of nothing. So that is why we cannot be very sure that this text teaches about this doctrine. Or, for example, this piece of literature it also has some ideas about God creating something that didn't exist anymore before, but again, it is not the text from the Bible, and it could not be a decisive argument to say about the to confirm the doctrine of creation out of nothing. And we also spoke about the background of many ideas that appeared in the first century and the second century. And some background that we need to remember is that a Greek philosophy. And according to the Greek philosophy, the matter is eternal. So there was no time when matter didn't exist. So matter existed always. And of course, in this case, if matter existed always, so gods in the understanding, but of course, Greek philosophy or Greek religion, in Greek religion, gods were very anthropomorphic gods. So for them, gods and matter existed simultaneously. And because of this, in Greek philosophy, there is no room or space for the doctrine of creation out of nothing. But on the one hand, it is good because do you see many ideas penetrated to Christianity from Greek philosophy. But we cannot say that this idea of creation out of nothing appeared because of Greek influence. But Greek influence was really very important because many Platonic ideas were brought to Christianity, especially in the first centuries of the Christian era. And one of the most important ideas that was borrowed from Plato is dualism. And dualism says about the dichotomy between the material world and spiritual world. And the main idea of Plato, one of his main ideas, is that all of this material world is not perfect, but ideal world or like spiritual world or heavenly world, or I don't know how to call it otherwise, this one is the perfect world. So everything that we have in this world is just a shadow, of a universal, of ideal thing that belongs to a different realm. And he explained very well in his story about cave. So now we come to Gnostics, and this is a very important issue, and especially if you study the New Testament and writings of Paul and other epistles. So the question about the influence of Gnosticism is very important. And Gnosticism started in the first century AD or Common Era, but it was the most influential in the second century of the Common Era. So Gnostics were so much popular And even many of them became the church members. No, not all of them, but many of them became church members, and they were very influential church members. Such Gnostics like Marcion or Valentinian were were very influential. And as far as I remember, Marcion even was almost became a bishop of Rome, or he was a candidate to be a bishop of Rome. So that is why Gnosticism was very popular and very influential. And the name Gnosticism or Gnostics comes to Greek word gnosis, and gnosis means knowledge. And Gnostics pretended to have a special knowledge that was just beyond what is written in the Bible. And they had the so-called myth or story about the origin of everything. And in this story of the origin, it was like a hidden knowledge, not revealed to everybody, but they claim that they have this knowledge. And this knowledge, they claim, is beyond what is written in the Bible. And Gnostics, according to this myth of Gnostics, they made a difference between God creator and a true God. So what they say, and Gnostics, this doctrine was based mostly on the dichotomy between material world and spiritual world, because Gnostics believe that material world is evil world, physical world is not a perfect world. So that is why they spoke about this dichotomy between material and spiritual world. So what they believe? They believe that God is a very transcendent God, and he doesn't have any common, nothing common with the material world. That is why God lives somewhere very high in heavens, on seventh heaven, or I don't know where. And God even doesn't, true God, doesn't intervene very much in these material or physical world issues. And God creates, but God doesn't create material, but he creates through emanation. And emanation is like something is coming very freely out of him. And he had several of those emanations, and those emanations had some other emanations, and one of the emanation of him was Sophia, wisdom. And Sophia also emanated somebody who is called Demiurge. And this Demiurge became a creator of the world. So God is too perfect and pure to have much to do with the evilness of this material universe. So they say that our God was not created, our world was not created by God, but it was created by this Demiurge, and Demiurge is like a lesser God. Gnosticism held that the Demiurge created the physical world without any knowledge of the true God. So they usually describe this Demiurge as an arrogant God. So the God who believes that he is the only one God and there is nobody else except him. This idea of an inferior creator God, the Demiurge, is found in classical Greek philosophy and plays a significant role in Plato's dialogue Timaeus, since the Demiurge acted in ignorance of, or perhaps even as an act of rebellion against, the true God. His creation had to be considered as at best imperfect and more probably evil. So do you see, according to their myth, according to their understanding, this world was already created as being evil, as all the wickedness, all the bad things that we have right now, it was already created by this demiurge. So this is their idea of origin. And what they say about the fall. So because a world was already created with this wickedness, so they say that the creation and fall are the same, so they coincide. So there is no difference between fall and creation. Um, as long as spirits are trapped in physical bodies and materiality, they will be subject to sin, which is caused by ignorance of their true nature and whole. So, do you see, they understood that all of us are trapped in the material body, and that is why we are sinful creatures. And salvation for them is they need to get rid of this sinful body, so release themselves from the sinful body, and in this case they can be saved. So what about the humans? While the human body was created by the demiurge, it nevertheless contains a divine spirit which enabled it to establish a connection with the highest God. For this reason, human beings may be regarded as being superior to their creator. The divine spark with humanity possesses a homing instinct, longing to break free of the body and to achieve its true destiny. The aim of the body created by the demiurge is to function as a prison and cause humanity to repress or forget the divine spirit within. So, do you see, they also did this dichotomy between material and spiritual world, and actually humans are trapped in their bodies, and the only way for salvation is to get rid or release themselves from the body. Gnosticism commonly held that salvation is to escape from the bondage of the material existence and travel back to the home from which souls, spirits have fallen. God initiates salvation because he wants to draw back the stray bits and pieces of himself, and so he sends forth an emanation of himself, a spiritual redeemer who comes down from heaven and gives an attempt to teach some of the divine sparks of spirit what their true identity is and where their real home lies. Once they are awakened by this Redeemer, they can then begin their journey back home. Salvation is by knowledge, self-knowledge. So, do you understand? God was created by a demiurge, but a God, true God, the world was created by demiurge, by true God sent Jesus, and Jesus came not from demiurge, but he came from a true God. And so Gnostics considered themselves Christians and saw Jesus as a heavenly messenger. However, they rejected the idea of God becoming incarnate, God becoming a man. So why? Because God is very far away from any material world. So that is why the idea that God could become a man, God could take human flesh and body upon himself. So this idea cannot be accepted by Gnostics. These beliefs were considered unspiritual and against true wisdom because they entangled spirit with matter. Most Gnostics believe that whoever entered Jesus at his baptism left him before he died on the cross. So you can see there were many different, how to say, heresies around this Gnosticism, and you can immediately see some of the reflections or some of the ideas about that in the New Testament. For example, when John in his first epistle says that whoever confesses or acknowledges that Jesus came in flesh, he is from God the Father. So already some people see that probably it is this verse is written in polemics with Gnosticism. Okay, so now Jesus Christ is to be seen as a redeemer figure who awakens the divine spark within humanity, thus enabling us to find its way back to its true home. In order to save those who were held captive by the body, the Savior let himself be conceived, and he let himself be born as an infant with body and soul. Okay, so this is just in a very short introduction to this Gnostics myth about the origin of the world and about the cosmos in general. Do you have any questions about that?
Yes, Prof.
Yes, please.
I need to understand clearly what they said about the creation of man.
Yes. So the creation of man. So man was a part of material world. Our
Material world.
body is a part of material world. So it means that we are created by the demiurge. So we are created by the demiurge. But our soul is like a representative of different world. And our soul has this spark of divine essence. So that is why we the way of salvation is just to redeem our soul in order to find the way home and to get rid of this body, or somehow to release himself from the body.
So they imply a release of the soul from the sinful material body.
Yes, yes.
That's their concept of salvation.
Yes, yes. And it comes through knowledge. So that is why the agnostics, because it looks like they pretend that they know way how to do this, how to be released. And you can do it through gnosis, through knowledge. And this knowledge can help you to awaken your soul and to come back.
And they see the entire material creation matter as evil.
Yes, yes, material is evil by itself, by default.
But
So this is the idea about material world. It is evil world, and it was created. They do you see what is interesting in the myth? There is no space for Satan, and it is
yes,
even difficult to say that Demiurge is somehow related to Satan, but it looks like he is, but he's not Satan. So they don't speak about Satan, but they
yeah.
speak about a God, creator, who is really like arrogant God, and who himself considers himself like the only God, and he created, and he thinks that he created something good, but in fact it is not good.
Yeah, I see a hole in their concepts about Jesus coming to be born as an infant in human body. That is, if God cannot create the world by direct touch, because the material because matter is evil or sinful, he had to let them do it. Then Jesus coming from God and inhabiting the same evil matter becomes also defied. So I think that can be seen as a whole, or is questionable in their reasoning.
Yes, it's true.
That means there's no way that Jesus can come to save man without himself being contaminated by evil. That is, if becoming evil is just by physical contact with matter alone.
Yes, it's true. And for them, it was one of the weakest point in their presentation.
Yes.
Because that is why they try to find a way how to explain this. And they say that it was, do you see many of those doctrines like Docetism and some others are related somehow to these doctrines of Gnosticism. Because Docetism also says that it seems to be, he wasn't really in flesh, but he seems to be like this, but he was not really like this, and some other issues like this. So they try to avoid this, they try to explain it, but of course you are right that it is the weakest point of their presentation, so in their myth, because it looks like they contradict themselves. Okay, so shall we continue, or any other question?
There is something you are saying which I'm not getting clearly.
Mm-hmm.
You are saying that the claim of Gnosticism is that they want us to liberate ourselves from our body by having wisdom.
Mm-hmm. Knowledge, yeah.
Knowledge, that is, which is called Sophia.
Mm-hmm.
So when we liberate ourselves, where does that trapped body go to?
Again?
They say we are trapped in our body, which is sinful.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm asking, after we are liberated, where
What shall
does
we
that
do?
trap?
Honestly, I don't know. I don't know the details about the understanding of those issues, but it's very interesting to read about that and to understand how they explain all those things.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anything else?
Prof,
Yes.
if I got you clearly, you say the Gnostics have the notion that God was created or something?
Yes. So do you see? Demiurge is a lesser god, so he is also God. He is like a divine, yes, but he was created not through creation, but through emanation. So they made difference between creation and emanation. So what is emanation? Emanation is something that, like for example, something that is coming out of God effortless, so easily. Like for example, God creates, but he creates through this emanation. So he created some other gods, lesser gods, and they just emanate. They emanate from him, from the true God. And those gods also can emanate. And one of those emanations, it seems to me it was a seventh emanation, was Sophia. And this Sophia also wanted to emanate, but it seems to me in one of the myths, it says that it was unsuccessful attempt to emanate this Demiurge. And Demiurge was a product of a kind of abortion or something like this. So that is why Demiurge is so defective god.
So this Demiurge is the creator of the universe, or
Yes,
I'm not quite
creator of this world. They didn't speak about the universe because at that time probably
okay.
they didn't have this understanding, but he is the creator of our world. So he is the Yahweh of the Old Testament, if you want to say like this.
Okay,
So
now if that is
Demiurge with the Yahweh of the Old Testament. And that is why most of the Gnostics, they didn't accept Old Testament at all. So they said it is not like inspired book. And do you remember this Marcion canon? He included only Gospel of Luke in his canon and Pauline's epistles. And that's all. All other books he considered is not in the canon.
Yeah, because if they associate the Yahweh of the Old Testament with evil, an evil God who is proud and
you see, they don't speak that he is really like evil God. They speak about him like an arrogant God.
yes, an arrogant God. Then my next question would be, what is the concept of good and evil? Because what we understand to be a good a good God, they understand to be the opposite. So how do they understand good and evil?
Yeah, definitely. All material, physical world is evil world. So everything that is related to the material world is evil by itself, and all spiritual world is good. So most probably they understood it like this. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So now we come to the main idea of Gerhard May. So I explained everything to you because the main idea of Gerhard May is that the doctrine of Creatio ex nihilo, or creation out of nothing, was originated. It was a result of the debates between Christians and Gnostics. Okay, so do you see the main idea of Gnostics is that material world is evil, and in the second half of the 2nd century the theological development begins, which leads directly to the formulation of the church doctrine of Creatio ex nihilo. The defense of the omnipotence and unity of God inevitably demands the proposition the matter also is created by God. So the idea that the Christians, according to Gerhard May, the idea that the Christians want to defend is that God is creator, and he is not a bad creator, or he is not a demiurge as the Gnostics believed, but he is a good creator. And the idea that material world is an evil world required, according to Gerhard May, the doctrine of creation out of nothing. So do you see, because they believe that material world is evil, so creation out of nothing can somehow change this perception of God. So this is the main thesis of Gerhard May. And in order to prove this thesis, he says that we cannot find any texts before like 2nd century which could explicitly say about creation out of nothing. But after the 2nd century, in the middle of the 2nd century and later on, we can find many texts, especially in the teachings of the church fathers, and they say that God created this world out of nothing. So, and he assumed that the Christians formulated this doctrine while they were debating with the Gnostics. For example, one of the first who spoke about this was Tatian. He is the first Christian theologian known to us who expressly advanced the proposition that matter was produced by God. So they need to tell that it was the true God who produced the matter, but he produced it not from pre-existing material, but he producing from nothing. In Oratio ad Grecos Tatian gives a sketch of his teaching on the Logos and on cosmology. The Logos comes from God to order matter into the cosmos. The matter which the Logos shapes cannot, however, have been like God without a beginning, as in the case it would have to be taught of a second godlike principle. But it is brought into being by God himself. Creation thus proceeds in two stages. First, God produces directly the material substratum, and then the Logos shaped this into the cosmos. So do you see, they spoke that and how they want to oppose this idea that the true God was really a creator. And because the Gnostics believe that true God has nothing common with the material world, they maybe, as Gerhard May says, they wanted to explain it by the fact that God created not by touching the material, but he created just out of nothing. So he is a creator of the material world. Another scholar or another church father who lived a little bit later, Theophilus of Antioch, tackles the problem of creation, and in his second book addressed to Autolycus, he offers a complete commentary on the primitive history in the Bible. This is the oldest continuous exposition of the opening chapters of Genesis by a church theologian, which has come down to us. Going beyond Tatian, Theophilus speaks in subtle terminology of creation out of nothing. For example, God brought everything into being out of what does not exist, so that his greatness might be known and understood through his works. So do you see, God created everything out of what does not exist. So in other words, we can find for the first time maybe this formulation of this doctrine of creation out of nothing. Or apostolic constitution, God created the soul of mankind from nothing, but his body from the four bodies. It means like four elements. So they believe, and this is also the Greek understanding, Greek philosophy about four, how they call it, four, I forgot the terminology that they use, but they speak about like water, fire, wind, and something else, like four components of this world, and everything is created from these four components. So this is, but of course, this apostolic constitution was heavily influenced by the Greek philosophy. Okay, so now when I presented to you the work of Gerhard May, I just want to ask you: do you think it is attractive, his understanding or his theory that in fact what we have? He came to the conclusion that the doctrine of creation out of nothing was originated in the 2nd century AD or Common Era, and it was not present in the Hebrew mind before. So is it attractive? Does it sound convincing?
No.
No, it is
Okay, okay, good. So why not?
Let me say, Prof,
Yes, please.
even in the Hebrew mind, this notion that God is the beginning, at least somewhere in Isaiah it says, before me there is no other God after me. I am He. You know, and the notion that God is the beginning and the end, the first and the last, that is in Revelation, implies that He has been before the existence of any other thing. And to the Hebrews, I think in the prayer of Moses, that is Psalm 90, he sees God as eternal. Before there was any mountain, God has always been there. So I believe that the Hebrews would certainly support, or they would tilt towards supporting that God came before any other matter.
Yes. So do you see? I don't want. It's clear we are not supposed to criticize agnostics because it is just what they believe is just I don't know, the combination of some legends and some myth. But I just want to ask you about the position of Gerhard May. So is his presentation, does his presentation sound convincing or not?
Yeah, whereas it may sound a bit convincing, a bit,
Okay.
but there is a point where I see like he is escaping something or trying to defend the Bible, the doctrine of ex nihilo, using I think that which does not exist, like he's forcing it, that ex nihilo, yes, is there, but we have to defend God, we have to show, and I see kind of escaping, I don't know how to put it, but
what he says that this doctrine didn't exist in the Bible, so it's not a biblical teaching.
Yeah, it's not a biblical
according
thing, but
to
at the
him,
same,
according to him.
yes, but at the same time, he wants us to believe that it is biblical, because he comes out with the conclusion that
no, it's not
God
biblical.
created out of.
Yes, so he didn't tell that God created out of nothing. He wants to tell that this doctrine appeared or was originated after the New Testament canon was closed. So you cannot find it, he says, in the New Testament or the Old Testament, but you can find it only in the works of the Church Fathers. So that is why he said.
It is not true, but
yes,
in the New Testament it is there.
Oh yeah. Wait.
Hebrews
We will come
11.
to it. Yes, we will come to it. But what he does with those texts, he just disregard them because he didn't see an explicit statement about creation out of nothing. And it is true on the one hand, because do you see this statement that God created the world out of nothing doesn't exist in the Bible. So we can find it in some literature outside the Bible, but not in the Bible. So that is why he even didn't consider it seriously, because do you see, there is no
Professor.
Yes, please.
I think what probably would be appreciated is normally the discussion of a matter arises out of a particular intensity and focus upon it. I think the reason could have been that before there was not such a deep reflection and questioning on the origin per se, as it was in the scientific age, where now more thoughts were directed towards the origin. So it was there in the subconscious, even in the assumption of the Hebrews, but it was never a question to for people to spend time reflecting and interrogating.
Okay.
Because when you read Second Maccabees, as it was reflected, you can see there is something alluding towards that understanding, 728. So in the Jewish mind, you can see it is there, but it does not come up pronounced prominently because it was never a debate as it was then later. And I think that is why maybe it was prominent as he observes in the latter times, because it became an issue of contemplation.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your idea. It's really very, very solid argument. That many doctrines we can with the same success we can reject the doctrine of Trinity, because it was also formulated not in the New Testament. I mean, as a doctrine, it was formulated much later. But of course, we cannot say that it is not present in the Bible and many other doctrines as well. So that is why it is true, and many scholars agree with Gerhard May that the final formulation of this doctrine really appeared in the 2nd century. But it doesn't mean that it had not been existing before. So let us now move to the biblical evidences. Or if you want to add anything. Okay, let's move. So what the Bible says. And first of all, what I would like to say from the very beginning, I have the quotation from Gordon Wenham, Word Biblical Commentary on the book of Genesis. And it is clear that what we have already mentioned, the verb bara cannot be used as an argument for the creation out of nothing, because there are many cases, not many cases, but at least there are some cases where this verb is used not for the creation of something which came out of nothing. So that is why this is not a strong argument for this doctrine. But as Gordon Wenham says, that God did create the world out of nothing is certainly implied by other Old Testament passages which speak of his creating everything by his word and his existence before the world. And he mentions two verses. So let us look at some of the verses. So here I made some
Prof.
Yes.
If you would go back to that last statement, I didn't get it quite well. How you related it to the first one? How it relates to the first one? Please, if you can come up again. Yeah, this and yes, so this and that. How they connect?
This is the quotation from Gordon Wenham's commentary on the book of Genesis, and he says that the word bara is not a term exclusively reserved for creation out of nothing. For example, it can be used for the creation of Israel, Isaiah 43:15. Nevertheless, as with the word create in English, there is a stress on the artist's freedom and power. The more so in the Hebrew, as the word is used solely for God's activity. So the verb bara doesn't denote creation out of nothing. It preserves the same idea, namely God effortless, totally free and unbound, creating. His sovereignty, or maybe by his sovereignty, it's never mentioned what God created out of. So his main idea is that we cannot use the verb bara as an argument for creation out of nothing. And he says that this verb means that God is created effortlessly. So he is totally free and in his creation. So that is why he says the meaning of the verb. But of course, it also could be just a speculation, because it's very difficult to say something certain here. But the same author, Gordon Wenham, says that it doesn't mean that the doctrine of creation out of nothing is not present in the Bible. But we need to find some other passages that more clearly speak about the creation out of nothing. Is it clear?
Yes, it's clear, Prof.
But Prof,
yes.
I have a concern.
Yes, please.
Where did this idea of trying to find out from where did God create come from? Because why shouldn't it be enough if God has said that he has created? Why must we want to know from where did he create?
Yeah. So it's a very, very good question. So, and I understand your question is like, maybe we can just put this question aside and we don't need to spend time and debate about was it really creation out of nothing or not. But this question and this doctrine is really important because it says about something about God. If it is not about God, probably we can just leave it as it is and didn't very much speak about this. But if God didn't create out of nothing, yes, in this case, it means that matter is eternal. Do you understand?
Yes.
Matter is eternal. And it means that God didn't create matter, but matter existed together with God from the very beginning. So if we reject the idea of creation out of nothing, so we will have a completely different picture of God.
Definitely.
And of course, this is very disturbing. So that is why many conservative theologians, they stand very firmly on this position, including our church. Because if it is not creation out of nothing, so what it is just very similar to ancient Near Eastern stories about creation, when God created something from the pre-existing matter. And matter, in this case, could be just could have existed even before God. Okay, so this is important. So let us move on. Now let us speak about some of the verses that can be used for argumentation that the doctrine of creation out of nothing is really in the Bible. And the first very important issue, the verses that speak about the eternity of God. God is eternal. And if God is eternal, so it means that He is the first, He is the last one, and He created everything. So before the mountains were brought forth, or ever, you had formed the earth and the world. From everlasting to everlasting, you are God. So if God is everlasting, there is nothing had existed before God. So in this case, we can see that God created everything. And if there was nothing in the world except God, so He created it out of nothing. He has made everything beautiful in His time. Also, He has put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. So this statement says that He has made everything. And the fact that God created everything says that actually He created it, even material world was created, and it was created out of nothing. Thus says the Lord, the King of Israel and His Redeemer, the Lord of hosts, I am the first and I am the last. Beside me, there is no God. So it's also the statement that He is the first and He is the last means that everything is created out of him. Yeah. And Proverbs chapter 8:22, the famous passage which speaks about creation and wisdom. The Lord possesses me, it means wisdom, at the beginning of his work, the first of his acts of old. So do you see? The wisdom or God's wisdom existed in the world even before something was created. Ages ago, I was set up at the first, before the beginning of the earth. When there was no depth, I was brought forth. When there were no springs abounding with water, before the mountains had been shaped, before the hills, I was brought forth. Before he had made an earth with its fields, or the first of the dust of the world. When he established the heavens, I was there. When he drew a circle on the face of the deep. So it is clear that God's wisdom existed and God existed even before something was created. And some scholars say that wisdom here, and probably you talked about it with Dr. Malak when you spoke about Proverbs, that wisdom here is a kind of a symbol of Jesus Christ. But of course, some debate, but scholars always debate. And God is creator of everything. For from him and through him and for him are all things. To him be the glory forever. So everything was created through him, through God. For every house is built by someone, but God is the builder of everything. For from him and through him and, oh, this is the same verse. Okay. And we have many other verses which say that God is creator of everything. For by him all things were created, in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him. Or Revelation, worthy are you, our Lord and God, to receive glory and honor and power, for you created all things, and by your will they existed and were created. Okay, and Nehemiah speaks almost the same, that God created everything. And also we have some verse, they say that God created by word. So if he created by word, it doesn't mean that he used anything for creation except the word. Let them praise the name of the Lord, for he commanded and they were created. By the word of the Lord the heavens were made, their starry host by the breath of his mouth. And also we have at least two texts that say that God creates something that didn't exist before. By faith, we understand that the universe was created by the word of God, so that what is seen was not made out of things that are visible. And as it is written, I have made you the father of many nations, in the presence of the God in whom he believed, who gives life to the dead and calls into existence the things that do not exist. So the last statement says about this property of God. So he can do something from the things that do not exist. So we can see that the conclusion is very similar to the conclusion that Pastor Nicholas did, even though May's main thesis that the doctrine of creation out of nothing was formulated in the midst of controversy in the late 2nd century is correct. So this author, Paul Copan, agrees that the doctrine final formulation of the doctrine happened in the late 2nd century. But this would still leave untouched the issue of whether or not it is a biblical doctrine. Christian doctrines such as Christ's deity, The hypostatic union and the Trinity were similarly forged in the fires of theological controversy. To assert then that this doctrine is not biblical simply because it has been formulated through the provocation of heresy doesn't follow. After all, it usually takes the heretic to create the theologian. So this is the conclusion that I would like to do, and I hope we have enough evidence to say that the doctrine creation out of nothing is really biblical doctrine, and we have many texts that indicate to this, that God, when he creates out of nothing, although he can use something for creation as well. But he is able to create out of nothing. Okay, any questions?
Yes, Prof.
Yes, please.
Yeah, it's not a question. It's a reaction. I'm so much interested by what is found in Proverbs 8. 8, is it? I can't get the verse now. Before the first dust, before the first dust was created.
Shall I show a slide?
It touches. Hello?
Shall I project a slide with the text or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Prof. That's Proverbs 8.
This one?
Here it says, or the first of the dust of the world. So it touches on the minutest part of matter. So this line, the third line from bottom, this line is a clear indication that God formed the world from the minutest parts of matter. Before the first of the dust of the world came, wisdom that God used impression was there. So it's a strong evidence that God created the world out of, that God was before matter and he made the world out of nothing.
Thank you. Yeah.
Then, this is now to philosophize. Can we say that God made the world out of himself, or where did he bring the?
Yeah, this is a good question. Yeah, this is a good question. So, and do you see? I think that even today, when we have advanced knowledge about some science, about physics, and do you see, for example, even the famous equation of Albert Einstein, E, or energy, is equal mc square, yes? So in this case, what we can say, how God creates by word. So his word is like an energy, which is later on is producing something material. So energy can go to material, matter, and vice versa. Yes, and do you see? I don't want to go to this direction because it's a slippery road.
It's slippery.
Yes.
Some things are better left mysterious.
Yeah.
Because Isaiah says we can't search out God's understanding.
Yeah, our ways are not God's ways. So his ways are much higher than our ways.
Our ways. Thank you, Prof.
Yeah, thank you very much for your observation.
Professor.
Yes.
Just help me. I am lost.
Okay.
In a sentence or two, then what can we say creation ex nihilo is? Does it mean that before God started creating, there was nothing existing, say matter? Or does it mean that everything that God created was created out of nothing? Because there's still that question of crops coming from the ground and man coming from the dust. So it is from that background that I've not yet understood now what is creation ex nihilo.
Yes,
Yes, Prof.
correct. This is the good question. So, as I mentioned, and you mentioned as well, that when we speak about the week of creation, we cannot say about that something was created out of nothing, because do you see, as you mentioned, like the land produced, God said, and the land produced something, and everything was created out of something, not from nothing. But the first phrase, and today in the second part of our class, we will speak about the first two verses of the book of Genesis, and the first line of the Bible, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, implies creation out of nothing. So what it means that in the very beginning there was nothing and God created. And he created our earth, our planet, also out of nothing. Yes. But later on, what we can see during the week of creation is a kind of modeling or shaping the earth, or filling the earth with the inhabitants. So this is what we can say about the creation of our world. So, but the universe and everything was created out of nothing. And our planet Earth was also created out of nothing in the beginning, but later on, during the week of creation, God just shaped the Earth and filled it with inhabitants. Did I answer your question?
Yes, Prof, you answered, but it brought in some other questions about the other theories now. Now, if we say we divide this like before creation, there was nothing, then in the week of creation, he shaped, and wouldn't that give room for other theories that especially do not believe in the 7 days of creation? Because we say he created out of nothing, but again in the creation week, wouldn't that but give room to other theories that do not believe in the 7 days of creation and the many years of...
Yes and no. Yes and no. Why? Do you see, even when we speak today about the creation, there are so many theories about it, and we just touched some of them. And you can see that some of them are really damaging, and some of them could be healthy. And today we will speak about it a little bit more when we touch the question about how to translate the first sentences of the Bible, and especially about the gap theory, So this is the topic of our next discussion.
That one will help. Yeah, that gap theory.
So I hope after today's class, you will have a more or less holistic picture about the creation.
Wow, that would be wonderful, Prof. Looking forward to that moment.
Okay, and yes.
Yeah, trying to understand Nathan's question and what comes to my mind, that God did not depend on pre-existing matter which he used to create. That's number one.
Yes.
Number two, that God commanded matter into existence.
Correct.
Okay, sir.
Yes, correct. Thank you very much for your observation. It's really very, very good.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. So now, do you have any questions? If not, let us make a break, and in 10 minutes we will come back. Okay. So our topic, we will start today, the week of creation, and our purpose is to make a kind of exegesis of the first chapters of the Bible, and to see all the details and all the problems that scholars encounter when they try to interpret those chapters. And of course, those chapters are something, it is not an easy piece of literature for many, many reasons. And you already noticed that even when somebody tries to understand what is the genre of this chapter, scholars cannot have one answer. So there are many, many debates about many, many issues concerning the week of creation. And today we will try just to discuss the first two verses of the Bible, of the first chapter of the book of Genesis. And we will see how many different theories and how many different ideas exist already based upon these several verses of the Bible. And the first thing that we need to discuss is the interpretation, or how can we translate the first sentence. And of course, the translation of the first sentence is related very closely to the understanding of the first three, or relationship between these three verses of the Bible, first three verses of the book of Genesis. And there are four different suggestions about how to translate the first verse of the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. So the first option is that verse 1 is a temporal clause subordinated to the main clause in verse 2. And in this case, we need to translate it like this. In the beginning, when God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and so on and so forth. So the first question is a temporal clause which is subordinated to the main clause in verse number 2. The second interpretation, or the second view, is very close to the first one. The only difference is that the first verse is a temporal clause, but it is subordinated not to the second verse, but it is subordinated to the third verse. And in this case, verse 2 is like a parenthetical command. Like, for example, in the beginning, when God created the heaven and the earth the earth was voidless and formless and void, and the Spirit of God was hovering over it, and God said. So do you see? So in this case, the second verse is like a sentence in a parenthesis. So it is like an additional sentence inside the main sentence. So this is the second way how to translate it. And I need to tell that the second variant is not very popular. But Jewish Publication Society and the commentary on the Book of Genesis, written by Noam Sarna, he interpreted it like this. So he made it as subordinate to the third verse. And the third view is verse 1 is the main clause, and it serves as a title to the chapter as a whole. So it's like a summary of all the events described in verses from 2 to 31. So the first verse is a title, and after that we have the real explanation of how God created the heaven and the earth. Yes, and the fourth variant is the traditional variant. Verse 1 is a main clause describing the first act of creation. Verse 2 and 3 describe subsequent phases in God's creative activity. So this is a traditional way of interpreting this verse that is found probably in the most of the translation, especially in the old translation. But some new translations try to do it in a different way. By the way, I just want to see what is written in my Bible. Yeah, traditional one. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. So no temporal clause. Now, let us consider why do some scholars believe, and some of them really emphasize, that the first verse should be translated differently from the traditional approach. And we will discuss mostly the first variant, because the second one is mostly the same, is almost the same, just with the minor variation. So there is no much difference between the first and the second way of reading it. So Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'ed haaretz ve'haaretz haita tohu vavohu ve'choshek al penei techon. In the beginning, so how we need to translate it? Okay. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. And I also would like to make some changes here. So why do they do like this? Why they try to translate it like this? First of all, they pay attention to the word Bereshit. And as it is vocalized in Masoretic text, it is clear that Bereshit doesn't have an article. So what is the meaning of the article in this case? So if you remember the Hebrew grammar, usually if you have a construct chain, in the construct chain, it's not a usually, it's a rule actually. In the construct chain, the first word, which is in a construct state, cannot take an article. So even if it is a definite, they understood construct chain as one word. So that is why they don't need several articles like in our case. So construct chain is a genitive case. It is a kind of a relationship between different nouns. We, in English, for example, we can use several articles, like in the beginning of the creation. And in this case, the beginning is with a definite article and creation is with a definite article. But in Hebrew understanding, in the beginning of creation is one word. So if it is a construct chain, they understood it as something whole. You cannot divide it. The only thing that can break the construct chain is the article. So if for the word in absolute state has an article, the entire phrase is considered definite. If the word in absolute state doesn't have an article, the construct chain is indefinite. And in this case, both words are considered definite. So in this case, because there is no article before the word Reshit, Bereshit, no article, So in this case, they assume that we can translate it as a construct chain. But the problem is that we cannot do it easily because the next word is a verb, and construct chain is just governs the relationship between two nouns. So you cannot put a verb inside the construct chain. So that is why, in order to make it a construct chain, what they did, they tried to change the vowels of the word bara to make it not a perfect, but to make it in infinitive construct. And it will be like this. Bereshit bero Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. And if we translate it literally, it would mean in the beginning of God's creating. So creating is bero. Bero is infinitive construct, and yeah, it can be used in the beginning of, and we can say it like in the beginning of creation of God, heavens and earth. And of course, if you want to say it in good English, so it is better to say in the beginning, when God created the heavens and earth, the earth was formless and void. Okay, is it clear?
Yes, Prof, I'm getting what you are saying, but I'm getting a little bit confused.
Okay, yes, please. What are the source of the confusion?
When you said the vowel, when they change the vowels in bara to bero, who did the change? Is it the Masoretes or
No, the scholars, the modern scholars.
or modern scholars?
Yes, of course, because the Masoretic vowels like this. So
yes.
they did it like in a traditional way. By the way, what is interesting, the first one who started interpreted like this was a Jewish scholar, Rashi, and he died in the beginning of the 12th century AD, so this translation is quite old. So he is the first one, and you can even go to Sepharia, yes, and the Sepharia website, and they have Rashi's commentary on the Pentateuch, and you can read how he interpreted it.
So he interpreted it like the way it is written here, or like the new scholars?
Yeah, like new scholars.
Oh, okay. But in case we leave it the way it was before, kindly go back to, okay, if it is like this, I don't know whether I'm not understanding it correctly when, if I can, for instance, translate this to be, in a beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Am I consistent to the construct chain and the grammatical way of translation, or
Again,
when I
I
meet
didn't understand.
in a beginning?
In a beginning.
Yes, I'm making it indefinite.
I see.
Though
I see.
because of the presence of Elohim, definitely an article should have been there because the Elohim is a definite noun, absolute noun.
Yes.
But to be faithful to the way the construct chain is written, I would simply say in English that in a beginning, God created the heavens, because there's an article for heavens, and the earth. I don't know whether I'll be a heretic in that case.
No, but in this case, you see, if you speak in a beginning, it is not clear what kind of beginning. Furthermore, another scholar made a computer analysis of the verb reshit, and he discovered that in most of the cases, reshit is always used with indefinite article, without definite article. Yeah, so that is why this issue is very, very problematic about it. But what also I would like to say here, how can we do it easily with the definite article just by changing the vowels. So we don't need to change the consonants. Because if a preposition added to the word, so we don't need to, in this case, article is not is hidden inside the preposition. So it should be ba reshit.
Yes.
Bareshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz.
Yes, Prof.
Yeah, yes, please.
Yeah, in the form amended by the scholars, Barashit Baro Elohim. That is, in the beginning, when God created the heaven and the earth was formless. It will mean that God only arranged a formless
yes, correct.
Earth. He just made the earth formless and void and began to arrange. So it robs God of his power as the
Absolute
creator. And if we go into it said does not put a definite article. And I think it links it to God, who himself is the beginning. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
So because of the problems with the connection, but if I understand you correct, you're right.
I rather we
Okay, the problem with the connection. So if I understand you correct, you are right, because do you see, in this case, if you accept this translation, in the beginning of God's creating the heavens and the earth was formless and void. The biggest problem with this translation is that it rules out creation out of nothing. Because if you accept this translation, it means that earth was already existing in the beginning somewhere, and when God started creating heavens and earth, it was already formless and void. And it means that God didn't create heaven and earth from out of nothing. And this both temporal variants of translation, the first sentence of the Bible, both of them rule out the possibility of creation out of nothing. So if we accept this translation, it means that we almost automatically reject the idea of creatio ex nihilo. Because it looks like matter existed already. So the earth was formless and void, but it existed at the moment when God started creating it. Is it clear?
Yes, Prof, it's clear to me.
Okay.
Are you saying it was? Are you saying it's formless when God was beginning to create? Or
yes, according to this translation, what we have, We
Yes.
do not have this statement that in the beginning God created heavens and earth. But we have just a statement that earth existed, had already existed when God started creating.
Which is very dangerous.
So it means that earth had existed and nobody knows who created the earth, because
Yeah.
it looks like God only shaped everything, but he is not responsible for creating the heaven and the earth.
No, we shouldn't change it there.
Of course, of course. And by the way, I would like to refer you to a very nice article by Gerhard Hazel. It's very old. It's already, do you see? It was written 50 years ago, in 1971 in the journal The Bible Translator, where he is dealing with all the nuances of the translation of this phrase. So the question about how to translate is quite old. So the debates are going on for more than, I would say, the debates are going on for like 70 or 80 years about how to translate correctly the first sentence of the Bible. Okay, so but now,
Hello, sir.
yes,
Hello, sir.
yes.
Though my network has not been stable, but I just want to ask a question concerning this Genesis 1:1 as the summary of the creation. Then from verse 2 to the end as the details of what we have in Genesis chapter 1 verse 1.
Okay, what is your question?
Oh, my question is that Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth as the summary of the creation. Then from verse 2 to the end as the details of what happened in verse 1.
Oh, we will discuss it a little bit later.
Okay.
So of course we will discuss all these four options, but the main emphasis we will do with the first one and probably the third one. Yes. So now, what I would like to discuss with you, I would like to consider some of the arguments that the proponents of this theory advance. And you can read them actually in many books. Probably one of the most the easiest available is Anchor Bible commentary, written by Spicer, and he also advocates this translation. And he mentions many arguments. And Gerhard Hazel, in his article, tries to work with his arguments and try to show that those arguments are really not convincing. Also, Umberto Cassuto, a very famous theologian, he also, in his commentary, and this commentary is also available, advances some arguments against this translation. And in some of the modern books, you can also find argumentation against this translation. You can also go to John Collins' book, Genesis 1:4, and this book is available in our folder, and you can read from this book as well. So some of the arguments in favor of this position. First of all is the absence of the definite article that we mentioned already. In a beginning or in beginning, yeah. And this absence of definite article recommends that the word has a construct relationship depending on the word bara, so the next word. So what we explained already. I don't. Yes, another argument that they advance as well is the parallelism between Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. So what they say that the account of creation, which is finished in chapter 2 and verse 3, After that, we have like a new beginning. And this new beginning is very, very similar to what we have in the Genesis 1. So we have in the beginning when God created the heaven and earth in Genesis 1:1, and in Genesis 2:4 we have the similar statement when the Lord God made. So also a temporal clause. After that, we have a parenthetical sentence, and this is verse 2. The earth was formless and empty. And also we have a parenthetical sentence in verse 2 in Genesis 2:5-6. And no shrub of the field had yet appeared, and so on and so forth. And the main sentence starts, then God said. And in 2:7, then the Lord God formed. So they say that if we have a parallelism here, because of this parallelism, we can say that because here in 2:4, in Genesis 2:4, it is translated as a temporal clause, so we should also translate as a temporal clause Genesis 1:1. So is it clear? Is this argument clear?
Yes, Prof, it's clear to me.
Okay.
I understand it also.
Okay, so let's continue. Another argument that they use, because most of those scholars, they don't believe in the Bible as a unique piece of literature, and they believe that it is some of the material was borrowed from other literature, ancient Near East literature. They try to make some parallels with the ancient Near East epics about creation. For example, Enuma Elish or epic of Atrahasis. So there was a question from Pastor Kajuro. For me, my question is, how do the scientists reconcile this with their belief that nothing comes out of nothing? If they say that there was already matter, then where did the matter come from? How do they reconcile this? So now, yes, what we are speaking about, most probably people who rely on science, they would advocate this temporal clause translation because in this case, this temporal clause translation assumes that the matter existed forever. And this is according to the science, because science also says the same. You cannot destroy the matter because matter just can be transformed from one form to another, but you cannot destroy it completely. Or matter can be transformed to energy, or energy could be transformed to matter. So, but you cannot destroy it completely. So that is why this idea could be very much in accord with the scientific interpretation of the existence of matter. Okay, so let me continue. So another argument that is very common for this is that it is a parallel to, or we can find similarities to epic of Enuma Elish epic or Atrahasis epic. And do you remember Enuma Elish epic starts also with the temporal clause, when the heavens above had not been named. So it looks like it is very similar to what we have in the book of Genesis. That is why if Genesis is dependent upon other literature, it is very possible that this construction, the first construction, was borrowed, and it is a temporal clause. Next argument. So they can find some parallels with Hosea 1:2, the beginning of the word of the Lord to Hosea. Here we don't have the word Reshit or Bereshit. We had another synonymous, Tehillah. Tehillah is the beginning. Tehilat diber Adonai beHoshea. Yes, but although this one is similar to what is written in Genesis 1:1, but there are some differences. First of all, we do not have here the preposition bet Tehilat, just Tehilat, the beginning. And the second difference is that here it is clear a construct state, because Tehilat, Tehillah is an absolute state and Tehilat is a construct state. So in this case, it is clear that this is a construct state, and we don't have also infinitive construct, or we don't have verb here. We have only the nouns. So that is why we cannot draw very much or rely very much upon these parallels. And also there are some other arguments, but I don't mention all of them to you here. If you want, you can just go to some of the literature that I mentioned, and you can just know how many arguments different authors put forward in order to prove this position. Yes, and as we already said, this interpretation gives a relative beginning to creation, permitting the possibility of pre-existing matter. It means that the matter and God always existed independently. And this is the problem of this interpretation and of this translation. And of course, it rules out the possibility of creation out of nothing. And now let us consider the arguments in favor of the traditional translation, or against this interpretation. First of all, what we can say that the traditional translation was a very, very old way of understanding this text, and we can see it based upon textual witnesses. Almost all known translations, not almost, but almost all known translations translate it as an absolute in the beginning, yes. For example, in Septuagint, we can see en arche epoiesin hotuos ton uronon kaiton gen. So it's clear that here is exactly what we have in traditional translation. In the beginning, en arche epoiesin, created, bara, hotuos, God, the heavens and the earth. Targum onkelos translated it in the same way. Also, we can say about the same. We can say about some other ancient Greek translation, like Simachos, Theodotion. They do not differ from this translation, so they do it in the same way. And furthermore, in John 1:1, when John says in arche en hologos, he makes allusion to Genesis 1:1, and this allusion also implies not the temporal clause, but implies an independent clause. So is this argument clear?
Yes, sir, but this LXX it also has no article. It says an arche, which means in a beginning.
Yes, correct. Yes, and here we also do see article is, for example, for me, articles is a problem. Articles are the problem, big problem in English, because in my language, we don't have articles at all. I don't know about Swahili. Do you have articles in Swahili?
Yes, we do.
You have?
But
No. Hapo
not
mwanzo, there is no article.
in that place, there's no article.
It says hapo mwanzo, Mungu aliumba. There is no article.
No article, yeah. So do you see? So in different languages, it is a kind of idiomatic. So in English, most probably it is impossible to say in a beginning, because it would be not clear. So how is it that beginning is not definite. But in other languages, it is normal. So that is why it's different languages have different issues. So, is this argument clear? Yes, I believe it is. So let's go.
It's clear, Prof.
Yes, another. So I didn't use many arguments here. Another argument is also from this article by Gerhard Hazel. So the Masoretic pointing of Bereshit makes it an adverbial expression without the article in the absolute state. This seems to be specifically underlined by the Masoretes, who accented the first word in the Bible with the disjunctive tifcha, evidently construing the word as an absolute with a translation in the beginning. So is it clear or not? So let me project. Can you see my screen?